We are Legion.
We are all.
We are one.
We are
Watching. Florida Illuminati.
Hey folks, welcome back. It's Gregg again, and we are here with a long-awaited developer profile. We're going to be talking to somebody today that I've been talking to quite a bit already. Really nice guy, and his name is Erich Wood. How are you doing today, Erich?
I'm doing well, thank you.
You also go by Woody, I guess?
In fact, preferred to go by Woody. Erich, I think just family members at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I've ever called you Woody, but I think that might be the first time I called you Erich. It felt weird.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get the full name out there. Now, Erich is, for folks that don't know, is kind of a pioneer in the digital card industry, and in many ways a creator of the world that we live in on our phones most of the time. I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you and talk about your history. You're finally coming out from some of your NDAs, I guess, and able to talk about things a little more freely.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I've always been a kind of a behind the scenes kind of guy. So being in front, I don't like to talk about something until I know that I'm certain it's good timing for it and things like this. And the last couple of years have been a little bit of turmoil, a little bit of closing out things. And I've gotten a lot more clarity on what I'm doing now, and even on what I've done in the past, which was a lot was just by the seat of our pants. And so even just understanding what we did and what worked and what didn't, that kind of just research and reflection, I think has been really good.
Cool. Now one of the things that I wondered, and I wanted to ask you, and I'm not sure if we've touched on in the past in our conversations, but coming up when you were a kid or a teenager or what have you, or even today, are you a collector?
Yes and no, maybe not exactly the way we now think of people as a collector. So I'm an Army brat. So every 3 years, most of your stuff gets thrown away and you move to the new town. So growing up in a military family, it was kind of like that. So off and on, I had collected some things, whether it was baseball cards, marbles, various things. I think mostly I became what I would consider a collector after college. Really started making some money, started getting more interested in, settling down, so to speak, in my world, my apartment and things like that, and started collecting all kinds of stuff. And I don't really collect any one thing. I just have lots of bits of everything, whether it's these Funkos behind me or coffee mugs or shot glasses or something like this. So it's t-shirts even, so a little bit growing up, and not as much as I do later in life.
My experience was similar as a kid because I was an insurance family. My dad, we moved every 3 years. Every time he got a promotion, he got sent to another branch or another city, or he'd moved to a new company, and we'd moved, somewhere. So we moved a lot as a kid too.
Yep.
I think a lot of times people grow up to be collectors because they lost collections. They had things that they wanted and they wish they could have kept. And that kind of sinks a barb into you that you play out later in life.
Yeah. In fact, there was an episode of The Hoarders where the woman discovered through psychotherapy that she grew up military family and you threw away all of her stuff. And so when her kids left the house when she was 50 or whatever, started hoarding because deep down inside didn't want to let anything go. So there's definitely that psychological thing comes back to you if you grew up moving around or just didn't have the means to get the things that you really wanted to have when you were younger.
Yeah, you want to have some kind of permanence around some objects and a control thing. Yeah. We're getting into some deep psychological stuff here right off the bat.
It is.
Yeah. I think it's a universal with collectors. It's something in our mindsets. We think a lot of times I think we feel we're not quite right, but I think there's something in human nature that makes us do this too.
Absolutely, and in fact, a lot of what I've been doing over the last couple of years has been reading a lot about psychology around collecting and what makes us. Because you ask a collector and they often don't know why they do it. They're just like, because I like it, like it's really hard to articulate why you do this behavior that others might think is a little obsessive. So digging into that, I think, is a big part of like, how can you create a digital collecting experience that replicates some of those psychological triggers in a way that is more fulfilling for people that are now growing up and more used to digital experiences.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's, the gamification as well plays into that, with, you're ringing bells, you're given that reward system, that endocrine rush,
Yeah.
in the reptile brain there, and paying that off. And that's what keeps people in it as well.
Yep. Yep.
And it's disturbing that you're trying to understand that and use it against us.
Or we can all do it together.
For sure. So now, how did you end up in the realm of digital cards? I understand that you actually were in digital cards, or kind of starting digital cards, before we even had smartphones or these kind of things that are so ubiquitous now in terms of digital collecting.
Yeah.
How did that come about? History start?
So a long time ago, in the during the initial web boom of the late 90s, early 2000s, I had a company that I've always been a serial entrepreneur and sort of a product developer. And we had a company that was developing, it was like CD-ROMs and websites and other stuff like this. But one of the things that we ended up doing was digital trading cards on little card-shaped CD-ROMs. And it was with another company that had gone out and gotten the rights and everything, similar to how Topps had done. And we did Star Trek, Xeno Warrior Princess, Hercules, Major League Baseball was one of them, Major League Soccer. And I actually have them here if anybody's watching. It's these, which apparently I have number 187 of 6,000. So this is like a little display that you would have seen at a hobby shop. So, to like a little pop-up display.
Just like a card box.
Yeah, a little card box. And then when you get you get one of these things that's card shaped, and you open it up, and you've got a certificate of authenticity, and then a CD-ROM that looks like a card. And now this is a physical collectible, because I don't have it. There's very few machines out there that can even run the software from 20 years ago. But on site in it, you put it in there, and you get to open up these cards, and they had little video in them, little trivia games, and some other kind of interesting stuff. Much more robust than what we see now with what digital collectibles are. But they were, obviously, it's not a free to play game. You buy the CD, and then you can purchase more online. It was, you just buy the collectibles the same way you would buy regular old collectibles in the physical world. But that was something that we tried. It didn't totally take off to really succeed. It was either not a good idea or ahead of its time, or some combination. The tech market crashed, everything. And so we sort of just went to so now it's on eBay or Amazon. You could probably get the box for $30 or something like that. But yeah, that was the first time. And so since then, it's really been stuck in my head. Wouldn't it be cool and everything? And even when the iPhones came out, we're like, oh, that's kind of like, the little, instead of a CD, it would be on there. That's neat. But nothing really came of it on our own. I had another job, and, the company wasn't around at that point until the summer of 2011. So if you want to jump, we can jump to the
yes, for sure, because that leads into the granddaddy of digital apps, at least from Topps, is Bunt, right?
Yeah, that was the first one that we did. So 10 years goes by, and iPhone comes out, and me and a friend of mine decided to start a development company to do iPhone apps. And we're working on this app called Jagamo, which was like a fun photo sharing kind of game kind of thing. And I was going to raise money for it, and it was out in the world and stuff like this. And then I get an email from somebody that, hey, I've got opportunities. Let's talk about some opportunities. And this is the kind of thing that happens a lot when you have a business. People send you, solicitations. I'm like, okay, let's meet up and have coffee. Turns out he was about to start as the head of Topps Digital. And what he wanted to do was to create this a casual fantasy baseball kind of experience for Topps. And as soon as I heard Topps, I was just like, oh my God, the serendipity associated with you just coming across my app and then reaching out about all this, it was just crazy because of what we had done 20 years ago. So we ended up, he had hired my company called Dog and a Horse, which is now just a clothing brand apparently, with the extra swag that we have laying around, to build the first digital collecting, or really the fantasy baseball app for Topps. And I really wanted to push the trading card metaphor and the collecting mechanics, just because of like what I had done like from 10 or 11 years ago. I think at first Topps was a little hesitant to want to do anything with cards or the Topps brand, because at that point it felt like it was like an old person's brand, so to speak. You know, it was sort of like, oh, when you think of Topps, you think of like the 80s and like bubble gum and stuff like this and cards. Let's see what we can branch out to get past. But we did end up going with like the first version of Bunt did have trading cards. And I don't know if you're familiar with that first version. It was only on iPad. It was launched for the, probably we finished it 2 days before the start of the baseball season in 2012. It was only iPad, and it had a very illustrated design. So there's lots of green grasses and, your avatars that you level up on, and that were very illustrated format and things like this. And it did have the card metaphor, and you flip it on the back and you have those stats. It's very similar to what is still there now. That little chart of stats, and when you're in the game, your stats would come in and it would populate there, and then you could play those cards. Although the first version, you only got 9 cards. I don't know if anybody remembers this. It feels like so long ago. You sign up, you get 9 cards, and that's the end of it. Like there's no pack buying, there's no any of that, right? And then whichever cards you have, that's the ones that are played during the game. So my 9 cards would score me points. But we did have trading. So if you had 9 cards and you didn't like those, you could trade with a friend. And we had leaderboard, things like that for that. But it turns out what people would do is they would just create like 100 accounts and then trade all the cards to the one account, so that the one account can score the points.
Get all the good guys over there and leave the bums over on the alts.
Right. Yeah. So like 100 is the beginning of alts. It was like, oh, maybe this is a bad idea. Only letting people have 9. They really want to have more. And that same year we came out with the iPhone version, and the ability to actually, you pay $1 and then you would get a pack. And then in the pack, you could swap out your cards for the cards that are in the pack if you wanted to, sort of like a poker game where you get 5 cards and you discard 2. We probably made $20 a month on that. It was more like a test out of like, how would people do it? But then that fall was Huddle. So Huddle was the first football. Obviously, we didn't have the NFL license, but you could see all the players, and we had the Player Association and things like that. So
that was in the early days when you had basically those mugshot football players. They were basically
yeah. No logo, no team logos.
Right. They call them the mugshots now, but those are really hot because they're so old.
Oh, I should dig out my my Huddle account. And,
yes, no, because Huddle's dead now.
That's true. Damn,
you missed it by that much.
A separate story. I did end up trading my vintage Han for a Ship as a She first edition 4 years ago. But anyway, Huddle. We first started talking about Huddle. It was like, oh my gosh, we can do football as long as we don't use the NFL. And so I remember in this first meeting, I was like, hey, if we want to make some money, let's just let people buy and own as many cards as they want. I mean, like, people are going to have like 100 cards. So I was half right. I didn't realize
by several 100,000.
Yeah. So, and then you buy as many as you want, and you would play 11, right, for Huddle. And that was it. And then you have blind packs. We started having the blind packs and things like that. But the experience did not scale well at all. There was a guy that had 30,000 cards in the first month. The app had barely loaded for him. It was like we were completely caught off guard by and it wasn't a lot of people doing that, but like it was enough to really hurt. So, but it was the beginning of proving that collecting itself could be engaging. Like, you didn't need 30,000 cards to play the fantasy game, right? But it was that first proof point back in 2011 that like, or 2012, that the collecting itself, like people want to do these activities, whether it was because they're hoarding or they want all of them or whatever.
Or the homers in the sports, you've got guys that's their team and they only want those guys, or even sometimes one specific player. They just focus completely on that, and that's all they want to do.
Yeah. And so we had no idea that this was going to happen, or it was all we were dog fooding it really for the last 8 years. It's more like make something that we like, and then just hope that other people also like it, right? And that worked for the beginning of this whole experience. So that was interesting, finding out that, hey, people are really engaged in this. And so we took the baseball off season. We sort of had this rhythm of Bunt comes out. It's like the flagship version of the app. So we would, from like, September, October through March, develop whatever the new features were and then run with it during the baseball season. And so, in 2013, you'd started seeing like buy some coins. Like we came out with the in-app currency, get free coins. So it could become more of a free to play game, use the coins to buy packs. Lots of releases through inserts. I think not nearly as what you have now, but sort of the beginning of understanding that people really do demand this special card and they're willing to spend money on the coins to get it. And we started making Huddle started making some money on selling the packs, but this model is the one that sort of proved, hey, this could actually work as a real business model, and not just as like a social network for gamified, something or other. It actually could work as a real business model. And it was also really interesting to see the beginning of the play between collectors and the fantasy gamers. So these two, and I'm sure you see it now in the sports apps, especially even more now, probably. Some people just want to collect, and then if they get something that's valuable to the fantasy players, they can trade it for whether it's more of their hoard or some other card that doesn't score a lot, but like is valuable in the collector. So that was interesting, learning a lot about the play between these two kinds of user archetypes. And all those mechanics carried over into Huddle. And then I think Kick was 2013, maybe later in the year, might have been the first season for Kick. And that was all very exciting. 2014, we added the contests. So that was more just like an expansion of the fantasy play. And then
that's where you really start to learn about the arms race of raising the scoring factors and how that plays into continued purchase throughout the season. You're not just going to get it all at the beginning of the season. You're going to have to keep ratcheting up to compete against the other guys.
Right, exactly. And luckily there is a season, because you could just in a game, you could just have inflation going forever, right? But one nice thing about the sports season, the season ends and then there's a break, and then you can start again.
Everybody starts back at 1x.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great thing. And that's why also the last season's cards don't score in the next season. They just become collectible, not gameplay. So a lot of the discussion had to do with all those kind of mechanics. And by this time, also like Topps had, at least a dozen people working there, like all the card producers that were doing the live ops and community and things like this were working at Topps, and our company was doing all the programming behind the apps and the server side. And I think we had an Android version that year came out also. So it was really kind of hitting its stride, I think, in 2014. But obviously for you and most of your listeners, the big year was 2015.
For sure. And before we get to that, I wanted to touch on one thing, especially in the early days of development, that I was really curious about in terms of how what you do is handed off. How is basically you've kind of like in this lab. I picture a room or where you've got a couple of guys on computers and you're programming this stuff. You're testing it amongst themselves. There's got to be some kind of Q&A where you're trying things out, mostly in-house, because I've never heard of really anything outside of that. And them like game companies hire kids to come in and play their games with NDAs and pay them in currency or money or whatever to try their stuff out. So how does the QA process work? And then after that process is over and you say, okay, this thing works, it scales the way we think it wants to go. How does the handoff go to Topps itself and the producers? And how do they decide, who decides like mechanics and things like that? You're basically out building a car and they're the ones that have to drive it. So how does that handoff happen and how does that work?
It was actually how it happens now. I think everything is in-house, so it's very different. But like, let's cycle back to 2015. It's much more collaborative than that. In fact, two of the producers at Topps, they're a game designer and a producer. They would actually work out of our office in Brooklyn most of the time. So it was extremely like we're doing it together, and they would also design features and everything like this. We did either none or very little user testing. So it was like when I said dog fooding, it was really like that for that first 5 years at least, where like we want to do something because we really like it and we're the users, and other people are going to be like us and they're going to do this also. And it was also from people with game design degrees and some of that stuff would go into it, and sports people. And so it was sort of like we just felt like we knew that would work. So there wasn't any user testing of new features, but it was very much more collaborative. It wasn't like we make something and then they can go run it. It was much more collaborative than that. And I give a lot of credit
small too. The teams were, you say, a dozen some people. That sounds like very small teams at that time.
Yeah, I mean, we started off with 7 or 8 maybe, and some of them were part-time, crammed into like a 6-person co-working space in Dumbo. Also, that was a lot of fun. Definitely not socially distant. But even I give a lot of credit to some of the at least a couple of the people over at Topps that really worked with us, because they really knew what they were doing. They helped drive what the features were, especially later in the development as the product sort of matured. So that relationship really worked out well, and I think we produced a pretty successful product by that time.
For sure,
even before 2015.
For sure. So 2015, everyone's pissed off at me because I stopped you just shy of starting with Star Wars. Let's go. Let's get into it. How did that happen? Moving from the sports apps over to with contests and things like that, moving into something where it was purely a collector's realm. There was nothing. There was never going to be a season. There was never going to be that reset in the off season. And how do you design differently towards that?
So when we first heard that we could have the license for Star Wars, obviously everybody was super psyched. I was very, I kept saying like, oh, it's going to be awesome. They just want to collect, and everybody's going to love it, and it's going to take off and all sort of stuff based on nothing, right? It was really probably wishful thinking. I had no evidence to back that up. I just, I just willed it into being. But it was really interesting because of that no game aspect. It was literally just cards, and like everybody's, well, what do you do with them? Nothing. You collect them. It's like, yeah, but what do you do with them? Like it's mindset of like, you have to be something to do with them. And we were like, nope, you just collect them. And obviously it took off instantly. We had very few features. I think the one new feature that I added was when you go between tabs, it has the wipe effect. Which I got kudos for on Twitter. I remember like the best feature being this wipe transition between tabs. But it was super basic, right? It was literally you're buying cards and you can see them in your card sheet. And it was like the other apps, but no fantasy element at all. But the content is obviously incredible. And I think that really, really helped it take off, not only because there's a lot of Star Wars fans, and it was around the time when the Star Wars movie was about to come out, and just the universe, the content is just so rich. I mean, here we are 5 or 6 years later, and there's still content, right?
Yeah, and so more coming all the time. It's great,
and more coming all the time. So that was a lot of fun to see that take off instantly, and that even though I had no basis for believing it would, that turned out to be right in the end.
So it was that quick. You knew immediately, like the first week, first day, holy shit, this is working like gangbusters.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not first day, but definitely within that first week or two, it was like, holy crap. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that there had been already three years worth of the other apps. So you had people that were already using the other apps, a large portion of them being Star Wars fans, that immediately seeded the user experience. And then, we didn't even know that things would become valuable. Like the vintage Han, I think I got my vintage Han when I was testing, right? I was like, hey, I need to test the pack, and I got the vintage Han. So, and then it sort of drove itself, right? You get that article that came out, like, why is this JPEG worth $250? And
Jermaine
and then people
Lucier.
started thinking, yeah. That article was like pinned, and they're like, yeah, good question.
That was the article that launched 1,000 million players. It's still launching players today.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. It was interesting to see that people were putting monetary value on them, but it wasn't a purely speculator-driven market. People still collected because they wanted to have them. They weren't collecting because they thought they could pass them down to their kids later, and that would become valuable in 30 years. It was still a very, very much a fan experience. And the other thing, that the fan feed, which was just a free-for-all, one big chat room.
It's so the early days are
great.
so crazy, and the same dumb shit that people used to do back then, they still do today. Like they're completely original. They think they just thought this up, and it's
thought of it. Yeah,
done so many times. It's wild.
And the 5 minutes in the fan feed was like my favorite.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, just seeing things like that, and I think related to the question of like what that was like when we develop something and then the producers sort of run it after that, right? Like we didn't have any live ops producers. We were just creating the container in which the artists could create and put their stuff out. The producers would run it and all this other stuff, and then the fans would use it. And one thing I like doing is creating something sort of generic enough that you still have, people can still do things that you didn't think about, and use it in ways that you didn't expect, so that you can discover new features that you might want to add. That makes sense. So the producer would start doing things that were just crazy, and we're like, we should build a feature for that because fans obviously like it. We should build that into the technology. Or fans would start doing something that we would say like, hey, they're doing this behavior, but they have to go to line to do it, or they're doing it with other experiences. Like, how can we capture some of that and help them do it more easily inside the app? And that's the kind of thing I like doing, even though it doesn't always look like the most polished maybe experience out the gate. But it's something that's a container that's good enough to give the people that use it the freedom to sort of discover things. And then through that process, we discover what we can add to it. So in lieu of user testing, maybe.
It's interesting to see how, to me, it's been really surprising that a digital medium, something that has no physical form, there's no way to damage these things. They come out and they're perfect from the day they come out to the day, the earth burns up in the sun or whatever. But it is very interesting to see how ephemeral a lot of this has been, because users come and go and cards go into dead accounts and things like that, and become lost forever. And there's people that spend years chasing cards in dead accounts. It's really been interesting to see that aspect of ephemera in the digital realm. It's something I would have never thought could actually happen.
Yeah, I think one of the key things around collecting in general that people say is the elusiveness of the items, and obviously scarcity. So if you have these items that were on sale, we made 1,000 of them 4 years ago, but 800 of them are owned by people that haven't opened the app and deleted the account like a long time ago, then there's really only 200 of them, but there's really not any insight into that, to how many are in dead accounts and how can you chase them down. And so you're reaching out to try to get those things is kind of hit and miss. And that's a little bit perhaps of how the physical world too works, because you don't know how many of an item was thrown away at one point, or how many still exist in the world, unless people come out and say that they actually have them. And it takes time for that to develop, but over time, that's what we've seen, like people sort of coveting these items that might be hard to get because they were available now 8 years ago, right?
Right.
and or in Star Wars 5 years ago. And there just wasn't that many because maybe there wasn't a lot of people using the app back then, and so that not a lot were sold. And yeah, that's something that's really interesting, and it's all community based, right? It's like what people own and how they it requires continuous engagement with the product in order for it to really exist and to be available.
Well, one of the really strange ways that collectors have engaged with, especially in Star Wars, and it's really kind of the home of hoarding, of people picking a character that they like or whatever reason whatever attachment they have to this character, and hoarding thousands and thousands and thousands of them. Were you around when they noticed that people were doing this and trying to figure out, okay, what can we do with this to kind of feed those flames? You know what I mean?
No, I think the melding feature was sort of something that started close to the last year that I was working on the project, and that was about it. Like, it was mostly about, hey, people just have all this base junk that they didn't want because it was filler in packs. Let's give them something that they can make use of that for and not feel like they just got a bunch of junk in a pack, that they can actually do something with it. And the melding or crafting feature is, it's a popular feature in games and lets you create something new and something else to do in the app while you're not buying stuff. So I wasn't around a lot, I think, when people really discovered that hoarding was, like, specifically, I think maybe we had talked about, like, hey, this person's trying to get all of their favorite team or something like that. But it was really something that came up towards the end in 2015, and then something that we talked about that happens at Quid, especially when people were trying to get 1,000 of each item of Star Trek white base, or then, oh, I got 1,000, now 5,000 of each, right? And it was more something that we talked about after that, more during the Quid thing. But I don't know that there's really a great, like, what would you say are the best hoarding features? Like, are there features that support your hoarding habit really well, besides like a count on the item?
Well, in the current build, they've actually done some things to make hoarding easier in terms of being able to keep blasting that same trade over and over. As soon as it's accepted, boom, trade again and hit the same one again and again. So when you find somebody that has hundreds of your guy and you got hundreds of their guy, you can just pump those suckers out there, out in no time. Whereas you used to have to build every one of those trades 9 by 9, 9 by 9, and then send again, and it was very time consuming. So they've obviously understood that it could be easier, to do. But definitely the meld mechanism is, since that came into play. Originally, the monuments first started, they basically looked to see who had the most of these. Say the first one, I think, was Darth Maul, or it might have been Ahsoka. I can't remember which. Somebody out there screaming right now because I'm a dumbass and I can't remember. But they recognized that somebody had this many, and they said, okay, whoever has the most of these, the top 10 by X date, you're going to get a special card, and it'll be limited to 10. And back then, it was 10 was as rare as it got. And so they awarded those, and then they screwed it up. They did something wrong, and it awarded it to the wrong people. So then they had to go back and make another version and send that to them. It was a big fucking mess. But finally, once they got to the meld mechanism, where you had to have the cards, you had to take them to the den, you mulched them, and then you got your reward. That's when it really came into play. And that's how it's gone ever since.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way of accommodating a hoarder. But I mean, you still have to lose those cards to get a new thing. And so those cards are really a means to an end.
When you have a real connection to that card, and you've hoarded so many, and then you just there they go. I spent 6 months on this and they're gone. Oh, it hurts.
Yeah. And so I think we talked about before is, like, the thing that you get has to be more valuable than the thing that you're melding it into, right? So the thing that you're getting has to be more valuable than 1,000 of these other items. And sure, if you were selling it in the market, 1,000 of the items will be worth nothing because they're so plentiful, and the other one is worth a lot. But there's something to you, the value that it has, because those 1,000, it took you a long time to get them, and you went through a lot of work to get them. But I also think when you meld it to this new object, that new object now encompasses all of the history of the other ones. So you're in a lot of ways, collectibles are these proxies that represent things that we've done, or memories that we have, or things like this in the real world even. or quotes from favorite shows and stuff. So now that when you have this one, if you see it, you'll know like I melded that on this day with these 1,000 items. I mostly got those from this other guy that also had all these other ones, and then he did. So there's this whole backstory, so that the object really takes on the representation of all those other things that you were collecting. So I think those 1,000 things are really part of the journey that gets you to that monument, right?
Well, and then there's another level of hoarder too, where you basically have somebody who goes for the rainbow, and that's something that's gone back into the realm of physical, where people would want every version of a specific base card, or even inserts now, where you had to have every single version. And when you got into base variants in Star Wars, you started with your basic red, white, blue, and then up into the higher levels, all the way up to 1 counts, and that's where it really gets tricky to build that rainbow. And that's something that really hasn't been it hasn't been embraced, I don't think, and really understood by the current developers about the rainbow and what that means and how rare those are, or how difficult it is to build that. In a lot of cases, the monument is that last piece of the puzzle. That's the last variant that comes out. You meld your variant, and literally we all go hoard complete, and we literally create our own little gifs of all of our rainbow, flashing through all the different colors and stuff, and high five and congratulate and stuff. So that's something they really haven't hit on yet, is the rainbow, and I'm surprised that they haven't really caught on to that yet.
But this is a great example of something where you build something not knowing how it might be used. Like, probably variants are so that we can sell the same thing with a different color border more times, right? Obviously, It's like, it makes it easy, and it exists in the physical world also, in the variants and different rarities and stuff like this. But then users start doing it where they're starting to try to get one of each color to build this rainbow. Now it's a whole other journey that the developers didn't think about, or that now we can learn from users. Hey, they're doing this. Let's build an achievement or a tracker for their rainbows or whatever, so that if they choose to, they can track, their variant collections or whatever. So this is, ideas for Tops to implement. And then you can, and that'll make it's self-reinforcing, because that makes you want to do the rainbow thing even more.
Well, people have gotten so good at hoarding, and so methodical and almost industrial in terms of gathering up the requirements for these monuments, where there's guys that literally will do 20 and 30 monuments when those come around at the end of the year. What used to be the staggering achievement for one single card, guys are blasting out 20 and 30 of them at a time now. So it's time for them to find a new high to reach for there. Yeah.
And I think when you mentioned the trading thing at Quid, there was no limit on number of items in a trade.
Right.
Like, we probably should have. It didn't perform well if you did 1,000 for 1,000, or 1,000 for one. But people would do things like, hey, that user's new. Let me just give them a whole bunch of stuff. Give me one white base, and I'll just give you like 150 items for your new collection, or something like that. And that the freedom of having as much as you wanted in the trades really kind of opened up some of the social engagement. I think that's fun. And also for hoarding, obviously, enabled Red to collect 5,000 of each, white base card in Star Trek.
Yeah. I used to do that in kitten cards. Shamefully, I used to play kitten cards, and they had no limits. And I would I would go out every Sunday and say, I'm trading, huddle inserts or skate inserts or whatever inserts were available at the time. And I'm looking for tons of base. And people are like, well, that's garbage. I'll give you all my base for that. And I would go, oh, really? Okay, watch me. And I would pump out 7,000 base out of their account. And they're like, holy shit, you mean all of them? I'm like, yeah, I mean all of them. And most of the time they go, well, you're nuts. Okay, accept and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this kind of behaviors are things that you don't even plan for necessarily. You just see it emerge from the users, as long as the feature set accommodates basic fundamental transaction, like trading, or seeing your collection and how many you have of each, basic stuff like this. And then the users really help. They're not necessarily coming up with the feature ideas, but just how the users use it influences what gets built and how it gets built.
Well, if they're doing it right, if they're paying attention, and they, if the people are happy, they're spending. Happy people spend.
Yeah.
And I mean,
and the business model has a tendency to have unhappy people from time to time.
Yeah, well, they slip up or they overplay their hand, as it were, with the user sometimes. And when you can find a balance. I was
Yeah.
interested. We talked previously about you coming up with mechanics at times, and you mentioned something about the boiling frog, where you basically
Oh,
tell me
I
about.
forgot I told you about that. I was actually going to mention it.
Well,
I
I
don't
was
want to take
really interested in that
responsibility. I'm
because
going to
I
get hate
felt
mail.
like that. I've been that frog a few times. I think we all have.
I'm going to get
So
hate mail now, Greg. People are going to.
describe that mechanic and that psychology, and how, and maybe give a example of how that was used in the past.
So it was first used with it's the Boiling Frog Marathon that I called only internally. Obviously, wouldn't tell users that we were calling it the Boiling Frog. The users are the frog in this example. And Friday, our Firefly was the first one that we had. It was like maybe a month after Firefly launched, and I just came up with, hey, people, we had the marathon idea, like once a week, an item comes out for the one card comes out, and there's like 12 cards. So every week, it takes you 12 weeks to collect all of them. I was like, but let's start with number 12, and then the cards will get progressively more rare as you go. So when card number 1 comes out, or card number 12 comes out, it's going to be really easy to get, like people almost guaranteed, like, because it's like a 50-50 shot of getting it. You buy the pack, yay, I got it. And then the next one, say if the first one had 12,000, the next one has like 11,000 rarity. And it's a little bit harder to get. And then it gets a little harder each week to get the item. You can still get this item plus and give you some odds of getting the other items behind it. And there's this mass spreadsheet of like what the odds on every single thing should be from week to week. But by the time you got to the last card, and it was like the rarity was 1/12 of what the card number 12 was, like you would just be buying pack and buying and buying. Like to finish that set was just going to be so hard. So Boiling Frog, obviously, it was, you put a frog into regular water and then boil it, it doesn't jump out. That's what it was. Like we start off with a nice cool pot and you start boiling it. Well, and by the end, but it was weird because we didn't have a lot of user dissatisfaction with that. Like they got mad, like, oh, I can't finish it, whatever. But it still felt like, they were committed to it, and they probably, bought into it until like that last row where it's going to be super hard. But I didn't get a lot of hatred at that point for that. It was just an interesting mechanic. And I think we probably only used it a few times. The math behind it was complicated. So like the producers had to do a lot of work I had to make the spreadsheet, and then they had to like plug in all the numbers to make it all work. But that was my most evil feature that I came up with. And we made a lot of money because people would spend a lot. By the time you get to the bottom, there's only like 50 people trying to finish it. But
well, it plays into that. It plays into that thing that happens to gamblers where they're pot committed, and even though they know their hand is shit, they can't hang it up because they've got so much in it already.
Right, exactly. And then that's part of the psychology around consistency or commitment, and the completist also. Like people want to have a complete set. And at Quid, we really nailed the complete set idea because everything was very, very obviously a set, and everything is limited edition, and you have to finish the set. So completist behavior really started coming out a lot when we were at Quid, and people wanted to complete the set. They wanted to complete the channel, the whole app. You have people that want every single thing in the whole app.
That was something I never could have predicted, that somebody could say, I'm going to have every one of this particular property in Quid, and they had so many properties that I'm going to be complete on that. And when something came along that could break that, people got very upset.
Yeah, I know people that just dropped out as soon as they couldn't finish one set, stop using the app. It was like, even though I was telling people early on, don't try to keep a channel complete. It's going to be impossible. There's just too much. There's going to be too much stuff. It's just going to be, just enjoy the ride kind of thing. It didn't matter. People really wanted to have completed channels, and the Game of Thrones one of one, and then boom, a bunch of people just leave. They're just like, well, if I can't have all of it, then I don't want any of it.
Wow.
Even whether it's really interesting behavior. With the completists, they would rather have none than missing a couple.
Well, we've already started talking about Quid, but I wanted to hit you with a question, a really nice question I got from a listener and a friend, Dan Sigel. He wanted to know, he's asking, he says, I'd be curious to know what the Topps digital apps are now are what you envision they would be now. And what was your vision of them? Not necessarily in terms of what the build looks like, but just in general and the business model and such. What was your vision, and does any of that jibe with what we see today?
I think the today it's going it feels more gamey. Starting back in 2014 or 2015, they started porting the app technology to a game engine called Unity, and it gives you that much more like you can have the target thing. I can't remember what it's called. The where you're flying through the
The lock on.
The lock on.
Trench
Thank
run.
you. Things like that. You can have much more things that feel much more like a game. Supports much more game kind of features to it. So I feel like maybe it's sort of living in a weird area right now between, like, is it collecting or is it trying to be a game, or is it you're collecting but there's these game things that you can do with it, stuff like that. But from the app sense, like I don't do games. I don't create games. I mean, some people call, Tops and Quid, they call these collecting games, which is fine. But when I think of game, I think of, more game mechanics around scoring and things like that. But I think that it's hard to say what the original vision was. I don't know that it was ever really articulated, but in my head, if I think back then, I think I really wanted to have lots of individual with Tops, like lots of individual apps that had that catered to certain fandoms, that let them engage more casually in a collecting experience. Less of a frenzy, I think. Quid kind of continued that sort of constant frenzy. Like you're not making money unless you're putting out more and more content, and it's like we call it the content treadmill. It's like more content, okay, more money, more content, more content. And to me, that's sort of puts a limit on the business model. It's sort of just it's too much of a grind for the producers and for the users. But I didn't know that that's where it would go back in 2015. It was sort of, you start seeing the beginnings of things like this, but you don't necessarily know where it's all going. So I think it's hard to say the vision. I think it was easier to think of vision with Quid because we sort of just started fresh, and Top sort of just evolved to where it got to. And we were just like, I like collecting, so let's do this. It was much more of a off the cuff, sort of deciding on what to build and how to build it, and things like that, instead of, and then it worked. So, did we get lucky or what worked? Then like, hey, let's have a vision, let's strategy, and build a company out of it. So not to say that there was no vision, but it's hard to say. There was never one articulated the way that I've done it now with my new company.
So when you left Tops, basically the leave taking process, you have NDAs or non-compete clauses in a contract that you have to basically wait out. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some of that. We were so the guy, when we started, I left Tops. I wasn't actually working for Tops, but I left the company that I founded, my Dog and a Horse. And the head of digital at Tops that originally hired my company left, and together we started Quid in 2015. And it was about a year later that we launched Quid. So a year is usually the time frame. But even so, our non-competes weren't about like it's hard to restrict somebody from building an app around collecting. But we didn't come out with the Star Wars app. We didn't come out with properties that were competing with Tops. We started with like there was Funko and there was some Fox properties, and Star Trek were some of them. So there was a little bit of, hey, let's be careful and not like hire people that work at Tops. We didn't hire anybody that worked.
Don't go ahead hunting and poaching other guys.
Yeah, no, we didn't poach anything, and we were cordial. We were still in touch with the guy that was head over there, and based on how the original vision for Quid, it was possible that we would even have worked together, in the coming years. So it wasn't we didn't have a lot to worry about on the non-compete, but it was about a year after we left that we even launched Quid.
So you basically went into development pretty quickly thereafter. You'd already made a decision, we're going to go and do this company, and started working on that and figuring out what your vision was, what the design was going to be, and really went into it with a plan in place. And it was clearly successful right off the bat. A lot of people thought this was going to be the tops killer of this app. Quid was huge, and then when they got like Game of Thrones and stuff like
Yeah.
that, it just blew the fuck up. So how exciting was that?
Very exciting. I mean, again, we had a bunch of people crammed into an office that was way too small, like as startups do. But specifically, when we got the Game of Thrones contract, it was like huge. Everybody was just super excited. It took about a year to get that contract. I mean, this is something. These are efforts that take a lot, and it was all my business partner. I had nothing to do with licensing. Licensing and fundraising were all what he did, and was like a big part of our success in the early years. Our vision originally was we wanted to build one app that had all the properties in it, so you could do the cross trading and you could have all of your collection in one place and everything, which I still think is a valid one. But we also wanted to be able to grow it into like a platform that would scale better. Now that was something I don't think that we entirely nailed the platform kind of concept. But I think it was really exciting whether we're getting properties like Game of Thrones, or even launching the Fox stuff with Bob's Burgers was way more popular than we expected. And I think it was because it's just got one of those internet followings where like Rick and Morty was huge. Like I wanted Rick and Morty since the very beginning because I'm a huge Rick and Morty fan. That took a while, but when we launched that, it was insane, right? That went vertical. But the properties that we had, I think, were just really amazing, having that environment and then being able to build all the features that supported people with multiple properties. And also you could go collect something that you didn't like, so you could trade it for things that you were collecting, and all this cross-pollination I think was great. There was a downside to it, of course, when you start getting NBA and Disney and Game of Thrones in the same app, then you worry more about who your target audience is and what their expectations are when they come to download the app. And you've got people from different target audiences in the same app using it and not necessarily gelling so well. So like a lot of kids came in because, I mean, we had Five Nights at Freddy's and a lot of kids use that and everybody referred to them as the kids or whatever. But when you start adding the Cartoon Network stuff and the Disney stuff, and then you've got to do age gating and all this other features that sort of keep everybody separated, I think that it started showing its limits in that sense, when you started adding a lot of properties that really were not at all related to each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there was a time, that was probably long after you were gone, where they were buying up properties that didn't make any sense. Who is collecting this Elvis stuff, or who wants this Muhammad Ali stuff? It was so niche. It was literally like they bought a package of properties from somebody. I Love Lucy. I feel like those all came in. River Group used to do physical, and I think they all had those properties.
Yeah, it's probably from some management company that had the different ones. Now I was still there for that. I think
you didn't say no.
I didn't say no. Well, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't. I stayed out of it. Like, licensing is not my thing. Sales and licensing and everything. And my partner and the other people that were working on that were already doing a bang up job. So I didn't. I tried to stay focused on what my job was, which was really just about product development. And but it was interesting seeing more and more, and like you get Hasbro, and they've got, I don't know, 80 different brands under them. So you're like, we ended up with over 300 different brands. It's like, we don't even have the capacity to create collectibles for all these things, right?
They made some weird choices though. They start out with like Monopoly tokens, and everyone was like, what?
Yeah.
How am I gonna get excited about this?
So part of us, we were thinking like, people will collect anything. Like, they collected pictures, like these little 3D shards of glass that had our faces on them, like the people that work at Quid. Like the people, it was like weird. Like people just want the mechanic. Are they? This is something
Wait,
that was interesting to me.
there's a shard of glass in Quid somewhere with your face on it.
Yeah, I own number one Woody.
I gotta hoard this.
So the so actually it was traded to me by a super fan, or given to me basically. But we all put our faces against this window of glass that was in the office, and they took a picture, and then the 3D artist created shards of glass with our smushed faces on them. Yeah. So anyway, part of it was like, are people just going to collect anything? Can I put like shapes? Like, can I put like triangles and circles? Are people going to collect? I think no, and I don't think I would want to do that. But there is something to understanding. Is it about the quality of the object? Is it about the fandom associated with it and things like that? Or is there a mechanic in the activity that is important to people? And it's probably a combination of both, or maybe one leads to the other. So that was something that I was always, and still am kind of interested in, like what drives people to demand these things. If it's about the gameplay, or is it about the fandom, or maybe both.
So you were, I please tell me you were gone by the time 3.0 came around and shelfies and all that stuff.
Yeah, that was 2018. I had left the company. So I wanted to build stuff on blockchain. I wanted to do more research on blockchain stuff. And my co-founder and I, we just had different ideas on product and vision and culture and stuff like this. And so I just thought it was a good time for me to branch off and do some research on this new thing called blockchain. Not totally new at that point, but it was still, to me, it's still a budding, it's still a new thing. And I just started doing research on blockchain and business opportunities in that space, and wasn't actually focused on anything to do with collectibles at that point. I was just starting to learn like what's missing in the space. Like my master's degree is in financial engineering, so I looked into what they call DeFi, decentralized finance. Like, can you build smart contracts and models around valuation of items or things like this in the blockchain, and all kinds of stuff like that. Decentralized storage, I think it's still a problem in the industry. Some people are working on it. But then I kind of got just sucked, we probably did 6 to 9 months of research and everything, and just kind of got sucked back into digital collectibles because I've been doing it for so long. If we want to raise money for the company, you got to lean on your strengths. And I'm still super interested in how it all works. And in the meantime, I'd also been reading about the psychology around it, and I feel like I've got a good handle on how to build a product that meets what we are looking for, and for like the next generation of digital collecting. It may feel like a little bit starting from scratch, so I might start with a very small user base and then grow from there. But I think it's different from what we've been doing for the past 8 years. But borrows still on the same, about all the best stuff that we've done, but also just built on the psychology of collecting, and then the ownership affordances that blockchain give us. So that's basically what happened in 2018. Since then, I think Shelfies came out in middle 2018 or something. And it was basically like showcases, but we built showcases. The first version was like, let's put this canvas out there and see how people use it. So people started doing some pretty interesting things with it, including making comic strips, on their profile and showing off different things. But we never took it to the next level. And then in 2018, Shelfies was like a simplified version of it to help people display their objects. And I think collectors were not as excited about that, I would say, if just a pure collecting psychology or collector mentality.
Well, that was around the time where they also eliminated trading, which was to most people insane.
That came So Shelfies came first, and then came they replaced trading with the listings.
Mm-hmm.
So all this is obviously not, this is after me. I'm a big fan of trading, barter style trading. In the crypto world, people say trading, but they mean buy sell, so like a stock trading. So I have to be careful when I talk about trading. I'm talking about the barter style trading. I'm a big fan of it, what it does for the community and helps people. It's the stickiness associated with collecting in the community and helps you build social capital and all this kind of stuff. That's great for the environment. And but yeah, they replaced and then Shelfies became a tool to do listings, I think, and I've kind of lost track a little bit of a lot of the other features. But I don't think that
a lot of people feel that Quid's completely lost their way. They don't know what the hell they're doing anymore. It's a mess.
You know, I'll reserve comment, but the I think
I
it's,
don't.
yeah,
I'm not known for that.
it's but I think it's never about like a feature here and there, or like we need, you know, when we're licensed and now we have success, or this one little feature and not success. To me, it really helped to take a step back from it and then spend that 9 months to a year understanding all that we built, and now understanding the psychology, reading up on that, understanding how blockchain can solve some of the problems that we have around real ownership, and then the perspective that gets from coming outside of the box, and then really trying to understand the core things that people really want, and you know, maybe even talking to users versus what we did for the first 8 years is much less user talking. I think that helped. That gives me an added perspective of the choices that I would make. Not that I'm going to make the right choices or make everything that everybody wants going forward, but I think it helps a lot. It gives me a big advantage in how I look at things.
Well, you've already been incredibly successful and you're in this space, and kind of a pioneer, I would say, in this space that we live in now. And every step of the way, you've built towards something better. So obviously, moving into blockchain, your mind and your focus is now moving into that space and bringing what you know about digital collecting into that space, into NFTs and actual ownership of items, and how to build a market around that, that isn't that buy sell blockchain world that blockchain people are used to. A lot of people that are in the blockchain collectible realm are really steeped in it, so much so that they don't speak human anymore. I can't understand it. You've been great in making cutting through a lot of the opacity for me and understanding how this stuff works, and I'm really excited to see what you're going to do next. Is there anything that you can tell anybody, or do you want to tease a little bit, or just leave it at that for later days?
No, I mean, I can't talk about everything yet, so we'll be back on to talk about everything. But I think it'd be helpful also to talk about what it's like to build something for blockchain, because there's good and bad. I think we first talked maybe a year ago, and the main question that I had for users was, will they pay, right? Like, it's not, and so when you build on blockchain, it comes with affordances and constraints. And so our constraints are like, nothing is free. You can't give out free stuff to people, not practically anyway. That is then worth money, and blockchain transactions cost money. So if you're giving people free, you're just losing money. So it's not a good business principle policy to just give out free stuff as part of the game mechanics. Now I'll give out free stuff, just me to giving. I'll give you a bunch of stuff, for example.
Cool,
but not.
I'll take it.
but nobody's getting free coins every day.
I
right?
love
so
free
free
shit.
to play.
I love it. It's my favorite.
Yeah, everybody wants free stuff. So it's not. You don't have this free to play game experience. So that thing that we started back in 2013, maybe with the second year of Bunt, that is much harder to try to implement, and so it just kind of goes away. It's a more complicated login process. So like, it depends on the blockchain that you're going on. Like you did some of the whack stuff with the garbage pail kids, and that was easy. That was very super easy compared to
stuff. It was great.
Yeah. You log in, email, password, done, right, and your username. But like in the past, like a pure blockchain thing, you got like cryptographic like numbers, and like, because if it's totally decentralized, there's nobody authenticating your email and password, right? So you've got to put in some long cryptographic information and stuff. So it became very difficult to do all that. And extensions came out that would help you log in to an account that that was attached to Ethereum and things like this. But no matter what, it still is an added complication in the experience. Much better now, and I think by this time, even early next year, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Like, hopefully it's not going to be an issue for the thing that I'm building. So, but that's still a constraint that we had to think about if I was going to have a product out last year, for example. And the servers are typically slower than we were doing like 80,000 transactions a minute or something. Like people are buying at Quid. Your servers are on Amazon or Google, and they can handle all this number crunching. That does not exist in the blockchain. There's faster blockchains coming out, and the technology is still evolving. But those are like some of the top constraints that are sort of baked into what you have to do when you're developing it. On the other end, you own it, right? This is like so if I sell you something, I can't take it away from you. I can't block you from it. Like, it's yours. You own it as much as you went to the store and brought home your latest Funko. And that means that you can view it, you can prove ownership of it, you can get the provenance, you can transfer it independent of us. So like, you don't have to worry about it. Even if we go out of business and close down the app, you still have the object and can trade it with other people, and transfer it to other people and stuff like this. And we can't take it away from you, restrict it. And that's a huge affordance, but it comes with those constraints that I mentioned. The number one thing being that you don't get it for free. So it's much closer to the way the real world works, in that you're not going to Target and they just give you stuff, right? But
depends on how big your code is.
That's true. You can get stuff for free. They're not giving it to you. But there's also other benefits that you get from the fact of, okay, I have to pay for it, but I really own it. And because it's not a free to play game, you also don't have any farmers. So it's if there is some kind of leaderboards or things like this, you don't have to worry about people farming. I mean, if people are farming, they're paying and they're just buying, so they just have more money than you, right? It's not I create 1,000 accounts to like go through all the free coins. You can have, in fact, you can have as many accounts as you want. I don't care. I'm not giving you free stuff based on the number on each account. So if you want to have 5 accounts on the same device, for your kids and your friends and your alt, that's all fine. I can have gifting. I don't have to worry about you trading things and giving things to each other because you paid for it and like whatever. It's so I can have gifting it as, so I can just give it to you. And it's also, from a business standpoint, easier to measure your return on investment. So if I spend $1,000 to build a set of cards and I sell them, I hope I make more than $1,000, right? So if I only made $500 and I've lost money, and then I know I'm doing something wrong. So from a business standpoint, it's a much more traditional, understandable problem. Like, whereas before you might be like, number of users are going up, but they're paying less. And then, all these other mechanics that kind of influence what you're considered to be the value associated with the money that you put into it. But on this one, it's, you spent as much money to make them, here's how much money you made. So that's a big benefit on our side, simplicity. And so that's like the big thing about working on blockchain. And because of some of that, we also differentiate between the collectibles themselves and the user experiences where you use the collectibles. So like, our app is not on blockchain. Our app is on our servers, and you can use the app and access all of your stuff, and it's going to be community and things like this. But the items are stored on blockchain. So even if we close down this, you still have the items, and maybe somebody builds another user experience where you can access them. Or you've seen this with Wax, with the Garbage Pail Kids thing, because somebody made another marketplace where you can sell them.
Several,
right? There's multiple marketplaces.
Several marketplaces now, and they're all competing against each other and competing on price, because they all take a cut in the Wax transaction, and that's how they're making money, by with their hosting and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so that's one of the benefits that from the developer side of blockchain, and also hopefully it ends up being a benefit for the users, is that because it's on a decentralized, the items are owned by you guys. Any other user experiences can be created, as long as they have to be sanctioned by the properties. Sometimes no, but can add to the experience, and that adds value to the items. Like, What if somebody made an AR experience for your wax stick, your garbage pail stickers, and you can put them on the wall somewhere? Like, people can do these things because the items themselves are on a decentralized server, and you own them, so you can do what you want with them. So this is the sort of maybe the promise. It's not a perfect setup in that sense, but like that's the promise of decentralization, which is what they call blockchain, is a decentralized database, and that's what it. So I don't like talking about like how blockchain works. Like, who cares? Nobody cares about how Amazon Web Services work. Just it's a database that nobody really owns. And so I can't, once it's on there, you own the stuff that's on there. You own the data and the records of it. So that's like a big thing. That's like a big thing that when we started thinking about how we build something, these all influence, all this goes into like what we can build, how we take pieces of what we've done in the past, add new things to create an environment where people really want to, they're willing to spend money on the things that they're getting, but also feel like it was worth it. Like, so our vision is a digital collecting ecosystem that is as authentic and fulfilling as physical collecting. So like, this is authentic, meaning you actually own the items. They're quality items that are built for fans in mind. So if you're a fan of the property, that's the people that I want to be buying it. And fulfilling, meaning that we target psychological triggers that are associated with physical collecting, sense of self, identity, using the collectibles to become a better fan of the property. Like, you're a bigger Star Wars fan because you collect on Star Wars Card Trader, right? Like, if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be as big a fan.
Dork on the street, believe me.
Biggest dork.
Biggest idiot.
So that's an important thing. So like, all these things sort of go into like what we're building, like the ideas behind what we're doing, and really targeting just collectors and the psychology around collectors. And I think there was actually a tweet recently. One of the I don't want to say who, because I don't remember who it was, and I don't want to get it wrong, but they kind of nailed what the different kinds of collectors are. And in our mind, that's completists, it's hoarders, and what we call sharks, which are like, if there's a value leaderboard, you're trying to get the most valuable version of an item, or you're going for value and like the best stuff. And then I add in rogue, which is people that just collect. Like, there's a guy that collects only number 21s, right? Okay, I don't really have a I don't have a category for that.
Where is your psychological trigger, sir?
yeah. So like, green characters, I don't know, like you can, but that's kind of like what we see as the collectors and their mindset. And then there's a separate kind of user archetype called a market maker, which is buying so that they can sell for a profit. And right now you see a lot of that with, it's heavy on the speculation in the crypto world. People will buy stuff and then turn around and sell it for a lot of money.
That all the activity in the market is in the first day or two, and then it's completely flat, and it's on to the next thing to speculate on.
Yeah, this concerns me. I'm not, that's not a primary user flow for our experience. I feel marketplaces have to exist because if you really own it, you have to be able to sell it. You have to be able to get rid of it, and maybe it's worth a lot and you want to sell it and buy some more stuff. But it's not a primary user. It's not a primary focus of what we're building. We're building it more for the collectors and less for the market makers. And the market makers are an emergent user behavior. So if there's demand for the items and there's people that want the items because they're collectors, the market makers emerge as part of, hey, there's a business opportunity for me by buying some and then trying to sell them. Not the first thing is the business opportunity, because it's exactly what you said. You end up with oversupply of like there's too many people that bought just to sell, and now there's just a bunch of stuff for sale in the secondary market. But you need to have, but then what's the experience for that? The person who demands the object, who is a collector, they have to go buy it from the secondary market. And it becomes, to me, that's less of an interesting user experience. That being said,
especially in the interface that exists now on the blockchain, which has been fantastically clunky and not fun to use. And one of the biggest word that I wrote down and underlined when you started talking about this was the word device. And so does that mean that you are moving towards something that's going to be more on a mobile device and more of that type's interface, since that's where you've been all this time?
Yes, it's going to be mobile and web. So the web, I think it's really important to be able to touch your collectibles. It's like it's an interesting thing when it's on the phone. Imagine if if Star Wars Card Trader was just a website where you could click and it flips and then you click. It's going to be less, you're going to feel less attached to the objects. So I really think the tactile nature of the way the mobile works is important to the user experience. So it's definitely mobile first, but it has to be on web to support other platforms, desktop, the blockchain components. There's a lot of rules you have to abide by with the App Store. So there's definitely a web experience, but the main one is going to be web or phone, and therefore it's going to feel really familiar to anybody that uses the other apps. It just won't be free.
Yeah.
So that's a thing that I have to get, that I have to convince people that these are worth spending money on. And I know on the other apps, 5 or 10% of the people might spend money. And even if I just got 5 or 10, if that 5 or 10% wanted to come and spend the money here, but it's a big question mark about how much the free users add to the communities, and if that's a big part of the experience. If it is, then I might have some trouble out the gate, not having that dynamic. But this is why somebody's not doing it already, because if it was a proven hypothesis, then somebody ought to be doing it. And this is why we're startups. But yeah, that's it's definitely gonna be mobile. iPhone and Android people can use the mobile web version for now. Sorry, I don't have a lot of development money. And let me see what else I can tell you about it. It should feel familiar to people who use the original Top stuff and Quid, like the stuff that I built at Tops. I'm an iOS developer. That's why it usually is a mobile also, and not web. When you use the app, you won't need to know anything about blockchain. So the fact that we're storing stuff on blockchain, who cares? Like, there might be an extra login step that you have to do, but other than that, you won't know that it won't be concerning to you. So you should be able to do it anyway. We don't have any buying and selling in the app. Maybe not even on our website, but you'll be able to buy and sell in marketplaces that exist out there for the blockchain. And we only have barter style trading. So it's the barter style trading. You can gift, you can, our main focus is really going to be on the quality of the objects and the experience to be something familiar or something authentic to collectors. I already talked about the vision for it, but so like, what do you do with the app? Like, so it's going to be very, like I said, it's going to be familiar. The same thing since the same core user loop since 2013 has been buy packs, trade with friends, complete sets. And maybe there wasn't a notion of a set back then, but like, this is your main core collecting loop, but less of a frenzy. You figure 1 to 2 sets a week, some other events to help drive the community and keep people interested. Packs are blind purchase mostly. Interesting things about the way we do packs, like when you buy a pack, it's all from the same set. So like, I don't want people spending money to get a bunch of base filler that they didn't want. Like, if you're buying a pack from set number 14, you're getting items from set number 14. And it's going to be a lot easier to finish it. You might be cheaper to finish the sets than it is right now on Tops and Star Wars and Quid.
Ask me about 1983 that just came out. Holy shit.
Yeah, exactly. So in some sense it might be cheaper, but still the random chance and maybe trading is going to be important because the sets are flat, they're not tiered. So when you get 5 things and you got duplicates, you can trade with somebody else for things of equal value. We also have this thing about variants, where variants are all part of the same set. So you can fill a slot in the set with any variant, whether it's base, yellow, blue, gold, silver, whatever it is. So your completed set could have different items of different rarities. And obviously, the more rare items, the more rare variants you're going to be happy about. Maybe you want one of each color, maybe you want to like make the grows like the right things. Like, I don't know what people are going to do with it. But the main thing is I don't want people to feel like it's just gambling or just feeling like they're getting nothing for their money. You'll always get something for your money for what you're trying to go for. And I'm trying to bake these in so that it's part of not just the culture of the product and how we run it, but also into the tools that are used for people creating these packs and everything, so that the users have a much more consistent kind of idea and a much more fair, because you're paying for it. Like I said, if I'm giving out free coins, I'm going crazy, I'm doing all kinds of stuff. But you're paying for it. I want to give something of value. It should be hopefully a mutually beneficial, more of a mutually beneficial relationship. We also have like one app per genre or per property. Like it's going to be mostly based on our target audience. So if you were all comic book fans, maybe they're an app for all comic book fans, right? But like it's not going to have, Marvel and Game of Thrones and NBA in the same app. These are different target audience. Maybe Marvel and Game of Thrones might be similar, but you know what I mean? Like you were separating it so you can go into the apps like the way Topps does. And that's like the main, I guess, like I put down here you're not going to see Hello Kitty next to Game of Thrones, next to Garfield.
But the nature of the nature of blockchain allows for a marketplace that could actually work for cross trading, that basically could facilitate cross trading and create a trust environment where cross trading between these different properties, even into other properties like Garbage Pail Kids or Shatner, could actually take place because of the nature of blockchain.
Yeah, and in fact, let's say we're having this conversation 2 or 3 years from now, and I've got 10 or 12 apps. Like I don't want to have 10 or 12 apps, like, all right. So maybe ultimately you do end up with, hey, if you use all of the stuff and you're collecting across all of them, hey, here's one app that you can use that accesses all of them, right? And maybe it lacks some of the features, or it's it's I don't know what it looks like, but those are the things, or somebody else makes it. Right, because that's the thing. Like when the items are on blockchain, as long as the product is sanctioned by the properties or whatever the legal stuff is around it, other people can create experiences for these. And so I don't want people to think of like, here's an app and there's stuff in the app. I want people to think of, here's some stuff and here's an app that you can look at them and do this with. Here's another thing that you can do this with. And the more of these kinds of experiences that exist, I think the more value they add to the items. So it's a very item-centric philosophy, and not building an app that has items in it. It's building items, and then how do we let users interact with them? It's sort of an inversion of how we've thought about it in the past.
To the good, I would think. It's all felt very closed, and it's the users that have kind of driven it out onto markets like eBay, or now in Discord. Most of the buying and selling takes place in Discords, which are their own communities outside of the apps. So it feels like users have been driving these uses in these directions anyways, and the blockchain will fit with those really neatly.
I think so. And that's our big hypothesis, right? The big question is going to be how many of you will pay, right? Like how many users are really willing to pay that first few bucks to get some stuff and enjoy and participate in the experience. So I think that's the big leap, that we don't know how many of the people that are in the current apps will pay, but we do know that the crypto people pay, right? So anybody doing crypto collecting, that's all they do. They were used to totally paying experiences. So we hope that the same, some percentage of the people that use the free to play apps will also enjoy this. It doesn't have to be all of them, because we only need people that are that have money. That have money.
If you have a wallet,
such a crass way of thinking about
welcome all of you. Free hugs. The hugs are free.
It feels like such a crass way of thinking about it, but I feel like it's a more honest business model. Like instead of getting 5% of the people to spend $1 million and then 95% pay for free, it's getting 100% of the people to spend $1 million. So like the whale-centric free-to-play games, it's kind of I'm trying to stay away from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you're going to get some of those. I mean, we have new whales arriving on a daily basis in the Star Wars Card Trader app and in some of the
Yep.
other apps as well. And once they catch wind of this blockchain stuff, I think we've seen a proof of concept in terms of the few releases we've had with Garbage Pail Kids,
Yeah.
the Shatner, the quick sellouts. Again, a lot of that is driven by speculator, but in terms of we made a product and we sold the shit out of it, there's your proof of concept right there. So the next
Yeah.
phase is to bring it to a wider audience and get it outside of the blockchain box that we have right now.
Yeah.
And I think going towards a mobile app, something on the phone, that is what's going to change this, because the interface now is the problem. I really see as the biggest problem. The other element obviously is going to be the property, which you're not at liberty to speak of yet. But
Not yet. Soon, I hope.
Okay. Well, I'm looking
And that
forward
means
to hearing
also,
about it.
I think there's people, like, we could come out with any property, and there's going to be some people in the crypto collecting, and there's people in the tops and Quid and Neon Mob world that are like, that just like the collecting mechanics. And that goes back to what I talked about before, is like how much of this is the behaviors around it and how much of it is tied to the property. I really hope that we can do something that people who enjoy the property, that have a propensity to collect, that's our core audience. I know there's people that are crypto collectors that will speculate. They might end up being those market makers that I talked about, where they're going to buy up a bunch and then go, try to sell them on the market. But they're not the core audience that we want. The demand, I want the demand coming from, the bulk of demand coming from people that are actually a fan of the property. I think that sort of just drives the community and drives the value that people get from the items for themselves, not the monetary value, but like how valuable the item is to me.
That makes sense. But that's a great goal. Who's
Yeah.
going to argue? No, I'm not going to let you do that.
Yeah. And there will be whales. Like, we know there's whales, but it's different from your entire business is funded by targeting the whales and then getting them to spend more money. You end up with a bit of there's people that spend a lot of money that have problems, right? And they can't not spend the money. And I don't want to feel like I'm consistently targeting people that are spending more than they need to. People will do that, and that's not something that I can avoid. But if everybody's kind of in the same boat and they're all spending money like you do in the real world at the hobby shop, then I think that's the kind of thing that I'm kind of going for, a replication of a physical world collecting, which maybe limits our overall reach. Like, it's not a mass market thing, right? It's still niche.
For sure.
But I think it's an important thing to prove, not just for digital collecting, but for blockchain in general. For like, what does it mean to own something that's digital? And this is a great way to start proving out how that works. So I think in the future, everything that's digital collecting will be on blockchain. It might be 10 years from now.
Well, I often wish that somebody could figure out how to take all of our stuff on our Tops apps and blockchain that stuff, because the thought of it on the server now that I know about blockchain and stuff, and having lost apps, like Huddle is still there. It's just a graveyard. It's just, there's nothing happening there because there's no new product. And it feels like it could have a life beyond if it wasn't for the fact that they stopped making products. So it's really strange. And one of the things
I think
one of our users asked, and since we're talking vagaries and not about anything too specific, one of the things that's come up that's been a frustration in the blockchain has been the issue of mint numbers, and basically people fixing value and desirability around when did this pop out of the pack, just like we saw back in the Quid days of number ones, number twos, and that weirdo that only collects 21s. Is your product going to be geared towards displaying that mint number information, and will it be consistent? We've seen situations where two different exchanges show two different mint numbers on a product.
I think that's because the exchanges are creating the mint numbers based on dates or something. I don't know how they're being created, but it seems like it was an after the fact thing. We're ascribing value to a piece of the metadata that exists. But short answer is
100%. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
We did not predict this.
The short answer is yes. Like token IDs or print numbers or whatever serial numbers, whatever people call them, is a big part of collecting. Everybody wants to know what numbers. It's like another dimension to be able to how you collect. And we also have ways of doing. So there's different kinds of printing, edition printing. So you can have limited edition, which is we make 100 of them, we make 1,000 of them, and here's number 15 of 1,000 or 20 of 1,000. And then there's the other way, which is how we first started doing it at Topps, which we'd never had at Quid. Although at Quid, we had this thing that I created called Unlimited Limited Edition, which is just you have first edition, second edition. It's a way of increasing or decreasing rarity, but increasing the numbers but keeping it going forever. So it's not off safe. But in general, the other standard edition is we'll print as many as people want to buy until like demand softens. So it's like a Funko Pop. But we still give it serial numbers, and we print the serial numbers in batches. So if you're one of the early people to get them, you'll get a lower serial number. It doesn't go in order, but the first people to buy them will get like 1 to 1,000, and the next people will get 1,001 to 2,000. But there's no denominator until we vault it, and then once we take it off sale, then you can get the denominator. And you can always see how many have been sold already. It's just like the Topps, not the open edition, but the first ones where we just like how many the count that was out there. Except we add in the token ID. The print number is going to be, I think people like that. Yes, I think they like having a specific number to put it to it. And number ones are going to go for, going to be super valuable, and you can trade it for lots of your hoard and stuff like that.
Yeah, orders of magnitude value on number ones.
Yeah, that's an important piece of the whole thing. I'm trying to think of some other things that just philosophically that we have. It's being able to enjoy. That was
actually a question I was saving for our future talk, but it felt like it would be okay to ask, so I went for it.
Yeah, I can talk about the feature. I mean, my product, maybe it comes out in January or something. If it doesn't, then I've got a job somewhere doing something, right? So it's like I think at this point it's not. I can be talking about this product. It's not like competitors are going to go in and be like, oh, we should do that too. Like this digital collecting ecosystem needs to grow. People need to, I believe in the concept of co-opetition in the space. So like, yes, these are my competitors, but also we should be working together to grow the market. Like, I don't want to fight over a pie that's 100 people. I want to grow the people to like 100 million. Then we can fight over how big our slice is. So I do want other companies to be innovating. And even though I'm not doing marketplaces, it's great to see other people building marketplaces. Even though you criticize the user experience on the garbage pail kids, but the fact that they have like a gifting, like awesome, right? Like the fact that they're experimenting with these things is great. And so I just want the more acceptable, the bigger the market is, and the more ideas, more things people are trying out. Even with the NBA one from Dapper has got, video in it, and a lot of effort has been put into creating these quality objects. So, how much of that is important to the user experience? Are there people using it? Are they fans of NBA, or are they just crypto people? And like all this stuff is stuff that we have to learn, but just by doing and putting it out there. Like the technology and the market is too young to know where the future is going to go with it. So for me, like I said, the blockchain part, you're not going to know it on the iPhone, but I want to be able to create things that you can surround your digital world with the things that you love. So you mentioned like, oh, you create gifts out of these things when you get the rainbow or whatever. Like that should be in the app. Like hey, I just finished this blank and I did the thing that I was trying to do. Let me record something and share it to everybody. Or let me record it for posterity. Let me put this as my widget on my home screen, or anything like this. So, building it much more into like about the ownership of it, the value of ownership, and then your social capital in the community associated with your collection and how you collect, which is unique to you, is all what we're trying to leverage. Whether we get it right or not is going to be to be determined. But once I'm looking for beta testers, I will come back on and ask people who wants to try it out and give me feedback.
Who wants to play?
Yeah. Free stuff.
And then we take it away when we go live.
Yeah. But I think I did show you a little bit of the stuff I was playing with last year.
Yes, and I was really excited by
robust.
everything I saw there, and my mouth was hanging open, and I wanted to go to there right now. I'm really
I wish you
to
could go
see
there right now.
how much further it's come, and I'm dying to see what the property is going to end up being.
Yeah, I can't promise that it'll be one that you enjoy or not, but it's going to be it's a well-known property, and we'll be able to at least start experimenting and developing and seeing how people do and giving feedback, and then growing into the other properties that we want to do. So it's exciting. It's another, it's the third chapter, I guess, for me, and I guess fourth if you go back 20 years.
Well, I'm sure I'm sure you're nervous, because it's a lot, and it's always a challenge. But man, I mean, you've like been there, done that. I'm not worried at all for you. I think I have great confidence, and really excited to see what you finally roll out. Really excited to see it, and I want to thank you so much for your time, not only today, but I mean throughout the last year, helping me understand all this stuff. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, hopefully, I am, and also with anybody that's listening has any questions or whatever, we're staying in touch, and anything specifically about blockchain. The technology could be confusing, but it's really, to me, it's about the affordances that it provides and what it lets us do that was previously unavailable, and that's just about owning your stuff. And so when you build on that, you're changing the paradigm of what we think digital collecting is now. And next time, maybe we can have I think I mentioned, I have people on my team now that are going to be familiar names to others. I'll just tease that. And we would love to join in a party with other of your from your group or other collectors that want to come in and just ask anything.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Let me know when you're free for that. And we'll set up an AMA and post it to the Discord and maybe to the Reddit, and just see who shows up.
Yeah. And not just about me and my product and everything, but anything about the industry or collecting, anything like that. I'm an open, transparent book at this point.
Cool. Well, that'd be awesome. And thank you again for your time and offer of more.
Yes.
That rules. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Great talking to you. And thanks again. And thanks to everybody out there listening. I hope I feel like 1,000 times smarter right now than I was an hour and a half ago. It's great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
We are Legion.
We are all.
We are one.
We are
Watching. Florida Illuminati.